In early summer 1981, a 34-year-old man named Michael Aaron Foster arrived alone at Yosemite National Park, renowned for its towering granite cliffs, cascading white waterfalls, and ancient sequoia forests. Locals and rangers still vividly recall that June sunshine came early, dry and crisp, yet streams from melting snow rushed fiercely, reflecting brilliant light on the Merced River's surface, while Yosemite Valley echoed with the hum of insects hidden in thick canopies. It was a place people came to vanish for a few days, to camp, hike, paint, write, or simply be alone. Michael wasn't a Californian. He hailed from Portland, Oregon, where he worked as a freelance photographer and writer focused on nature. Just a month earlier, he'd published an article in Northwest Living about the spiritual benefits of solitude in the wilderness. Friends described him as quiet, composed, often lost in thought, a man who could spend hours listening to the wind weave through cliffs. According to a clerk at a small grocery store in El Portal, California, Michael stopped by on the afternoon of June 4, 1981, asking for directions to a lesser-known trailhead near Illilouette Basin, where high streams converged before feeding into the Merced River. He carried a topographic map, 2 water bottles, canned food, a large olive-colored backpack, and a Nikon 35mm camera around his neck. That afternoon, he stopped at the Tuolumne Meadows Ranger Station, where visitors were required to log their names and expected return dates. In Michael's neat handwriting, the register read, "Name, Michael A. Foster. Arrived June 4, 1981. Returning June 8, 1981. Purpose, camping and photography." He was never seen again. When Michael didn't return on June 8, no one immediately noticed. He lived alone, had no spouse or children, and his freelance work meant no office expected him back. But by June 12, his sister, Rebecca Foster, grew worried. For 4 days past Michael's planned departure from Yosemite, she hadn't heard from him, an unprecedented silence. A tightening unease in her chest prompted Rebecca to contact the park rangers. They quickly opened a case, cross-checked the register, and confirmed Michael's clear itinerary, hiking in the Illilouette Basin area, returning June 8. His moss-green Subaru was found intact at the trailhead parking lot, neatly parked under a large pine, securely locked, with his wallet, exposed film canisters, an unfinished journal, and a few personal items inside. No signs of a struggle, no signs of panic. That day, a search and rescue team was deployed, including veteran rangers, tracking dogs, and a helicopter circling overhead. They scoured obscure trails known only to seasoned climbers. Illilouette Basin unfolded before them like a natural maze, ancient cedar forests interspersed with granite boulder fields, streams threading through narrow gorges, many sections absent from tourist maps. For 4 days, they called his name, checked caves, stream banks, and steep cliffs, but found no trace, no tent, no backpack, no camera, no clothing, no bones. The weather during Michael's planned camping period was ideal: clear skies, no storms, no heavy rain, no flash floods from snowmelt. This made a natural accident seem unlikely to many on the search team. Rebecca, unable to stay still in Portland, traveled to El Portal, rented a small room, and visited the ranger station daily for updates, even joining volunteers in the forest. She carried a stack of Michael's photos, showing them to anyone she met on the trails, tourists, guides, photographers, but no one had seen him. By August 1981, with resources and funding depleted, the final report stated, "Missing, presumed lost and deceased." The case file was closed, stored in a metal cabinet, marked with a red tag. But Rebecca refused to accept it. She raised funds herself, printing and distributing over 2,000 flyers across California and Oregon, with Michael's picture and the words, "Have you seen this man?" A few leads trickled in. In 1983, 2 hikers from Nevada reported seeing a torn olive-colored sleeping bag and a soot-covered pot near a dry creek in Cathedral Basin, 11 miles from Illilouette Basin. When the search team returned, everything was gone. Either they were mistaken, or someone, or something had taken them. Then, silence stretched on. By 1985, the case went cold. But for Rebecca and the rangers who had combed every inch of Yosemite, Michael's disappearance was never just a case of getting lost. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest stories. In the years that followed, Michael Aaron Foster's disappearance faded into the haze of public memory. But in Yosemite, it lingered in campfire conversations among rangers and veteran climbers. At ranger stations, especially Tuolumne Meadows, quiet evenings sometimes prompted a young ranger to ask an older one about the Illilouette Basin man, and the response often began with a distant stare. Some believed Michael had slipped into a narrow gorge, swept away by water, or trapped where no one could find him. But others insisted that Yosemite in the 1980s wasn't just home to tourists and rangers. There were outlaws living off the grid, hidden in deep forests, knowing every crevice and uncharted trail. At a small cafe in El Portal, Rebecca once overheard two elderly men discussing a faint plume of smoke rising from a southern slope of Illilouette Basin in the summer of 1981 in an area with no known trails. They avoided investigating, fearing they'd encountered tax dodgers or poachers, people who could turn dangerous if discovered. Rumors suggested Michael might have stumbled upon a sensitive site. Some mentioned an old poacher's trail for sequoia logging. Others spoke of a hidden shack used to store illegally hunted game. In 1984, two hikers from Fresno reported finding a torn tent and a soot-stained cooking pot beside an empty boulder field in the Cathedral Range. When they returned days later with a group, the items were gone. Rangers investigated, but found no trace beyond faint campsite marks. Strangely, there was no sign of strong winds or flash floods to explain the disappearance. This only fueled the sense that someone, or a group, was living covertly in the area, moving when noticed. Between 1985 and 1987, Yosemite saw other disappearances, most attributed to accidents or getting lost, but seasoned rangers often cited Michael's case as one that didn't fit the logic of an accident. He had enough water and food for a week, knew how to navigate with a topographic map and compass, and the weather was perfect throughout his trip. So why was nothing found? In towns bordering the park, like Mariposa or Wawona, legends of a phantom hiker began to form. A tall, thin man in a wide-brimmed hat, walking desolate slopes at dusk, vanishing when pursued. A climbing guide told Rebecca that while leading a group near Illilouette Creek, he heard footsteps trailing him for over an hour. But when he turned, no one was there. Though he knew it could be an echo or illusion, the feeling of being watched lingered. Rebecca, returning to Yosemite every summer, approached anyone who'd passed through Illilouette Basin. Many refused to talk, especially illegal hunters and forest drifters. Some stayed silent. Others told her to let the past rest. During this time, odd clues emerged but couldn't be verified. In 1986, a group of cavers claimed they found a deep cave entrance near Merced Lake, with empty food cans and an olive-green fabric scrap inside. But when they returned, the entrance was sealed with stacked rocks. A year later, a patrolling ranger reported seeing a flashlight moving in a zigzag pattern across the Clark Range slopes at 2 a.m., an area far from any main trail. No one knew who it belonged to. By 1987, 6 years after Michael's disappearance, the official file remained untouched in its metal cabinet. But for some rangers, it was never truly closed. They knew something about the case felt wrong. A well-prepared, experienced man vanished without leaving a shred of clothing or gear. That wasn't a typical Yosemite disappearance. For Rebecca, this period was a long chain of silent, frustrating days, but she refused to give up. She kept sending letters to newspapers and local radio shows, hoping someone would recall an overlooked detail. Over the years, Michael's story became part of Yosemite's tapestry of unsolved mysteries, a place where majestic beauty conceals deep shadows, and some trails lead where no one expects. By early 1989, Michael Aaron Foster's disappearance had nearly faded from memory beyond Yosemite's campfire tales. The file sat untouched in the Tuolumne Meadows Ranger Station, gathering a thin layer of dust, marked with a red inactive tag. But for a new ranger, the file was a call to action. Daniel Whitaker, 26, had completed his ranger training the previous summer. Raised in the Sierra Nevada, a climbing enthusiast since childhood, he was always curious about unsolved disappearances. One late afternoon, while organizing archived files, he stumbled upon the folder labeled Michael A. Foster, Missing, 1981. He opened it, flipping through search reports, studying Michael's portrait with its bright yet serious eyes. The details immediately troubled him. Extensive experience, full gear, ideal weather, yet no trace. He was particularly haunted by a 1981 search team ranger's note. Illilouette Basin, not fully searched due to extremely rugged terrain on the southern edge. Daniel began spending his free time rereading the reports, comparing them to old Yosemite topographic maps. He found a copy of the map used by the search team, but noticed something odd when cross-referencing it with a 1988 updated map. A zigzag path leading to a high rocky outcrop in the southeastern edge of Illilouette Basin appeared on the new map, but was absent in 1981. When Daniel checked the evidence locker, hoping to find Michael's belongings, he found only a few items: exposed film canisters, an unfinished journal, and another map, not one kept by the search team, but sent to the office in 1982 from Michael's Portland apartment when his family cleared it out. The map was worn, marked with red ink lines in Michael's hand, a circuitous route, matching no official trail, ending in a red X on the edge of Illilouette Basin, near the Clark Range. Daniel's pulse quickened. If this was Michael's private itinerary, he may have intentionally gone to a place never covered in search reports. He showed the map to an older colleague, Ranger Paul Henderson, who'd been part of the 1981 search. Paul glanced at it and shook his head. "We didn't go there in '81. Too far and steep, not in the plan. Time and manpower weren't enough." When Daniel asked why they never returned to search, Paul sighed. "You're young, but some cases the higher-ups say, drop, you drop. Don't ask too much." The response only fueled Daniel's resolve. He spent the next month researching the area marked by the X. Old records showed it had almost no trails, with sheer granite faces, many sections obscured by cedar forests, and snow-covered nearly year-round at high elevation. However, some veteran rangers mentioned a rocky outcrop called Buzzard's Perch, where vultures gathered, about 7 miles as the crow flies from Illilouette Basin. It wasn't officially marked because the route was treacherous, known only to daring climbers or illegal hunters. Daniel submitted a proposal to survey Buzzard's Perch to complete the 1981 missing person file, but his superiors rejected it, citing no budget for a closed case. He didn't give up. In March 1989, Daniel enlisted a childhood friend, Jake Collins, now a climbing guide in Mariposa. They prepared for a winter climb, specialized boots, ropes, a handheld GPS, and Michael's X-marked map. They set out from the Illilouette Basin trailhead at dawn, crossing shallow streams and steep cliffs, some sections requiring crawling to pass. By late afternoon, after over 6 hours of climbing, they reached a wide rocky ledge, whipped by strong winds, overlooking a narrow valley below. There, under an old pine leaning toward the cliff, Daniel spotted something. A rusted steel camp stove, half buried in dirt and decayed leaves. A few steps away, under a large boulder, was a scrap of thick, worn olive-green fabric, identical to 1980s hiking backpacks. But what stopped Daniel cold was the old pine. Someone had carved deeply into it. The letters MAF and the numbers June 6, '81, just 2 days after Michael signed the ranger log. The carving had faded with time, but was still clear. Daniel stared for a long moment, feeling both elated and uneasy. He knew collateral, knew he'd found the first evidence that Michael had been here, and may have stayed longer than anyone thought. But it also opened a new question: if Michael was here, why was no other trace found, and what kept him from ever returning? Daniel barely slept that night. The image of the letters MAF carved into the tree and the olive-green fabric scrap replayed in his mind. The carving, dated June 6, '81, proved Michael was alive at least 2 days after entering the forest, but it also raised another mystery. Why did he choose to climb to Buzzard's Perch, a place almost no one knew, and then vanish? Daniel shared the story with Jake, who mentioned a place he'd heard about from an old climbing guide, Eagle's Hollow. It was a hidden valley on the southern edge of Buzzard's Perch, walled off by sheer cliffs and dense cedar forests. The area didn't appear on any tourist maps, but local climbers called it the Eagle's Nest because golden eagles often nested on its high ledges. Rumor had it that Eagle's Hollow had been nearly untouched since the 1960s due to its treacherous access, reachable only by a winding path through western rock crevices. When Daniel overlaid Michael's X-marked map onto modern satellite imagery, he realized the X sat near the center of Eagle's Hollow. This left no doubt Michael had gone there intentionally. But the reason remained a blank. In July 1989, Daniel and Jake planned a return to Buzzard's Perch, this time to venture deeper and find a way into Eagle's Hollow. They prepared thoroughly: 60-meter climbing ropes, rock anchors, a lightweight tent, food for 4 days, and a camera to document everything. They set out from Illilouette Basin at dawn, taking nearly a day and a half to reach the pine with Michael's carving. From there, heading southwest, the terrain shifted abruptly. Granite slabs tilted at 60 degrees, interspersed with deep fissures and thick thorny brush. Jake, with years of climbing experience, found a crevice to anchor ropes for a descent. As they edged along the slick, steep slope, the wind faded, replaced by an eerie silence. After nearly 3 hours of slow movement, they reached the valley floor, Eagle's Hollow. The scene unfolded like another world, a moss-covered ground, massive fallen pines forming natural barriers, and a clearing in the center where sunlight filtered through an overhead gap, casting dappled golden streaks. The air was cool, damp, and utterly silent. Daniel immediately noticed anomalies. Near the clearing, a circle of stones surrounded faded ash, a remnant of an old fire. A few meters away, under a fallen tree, lay a rusted metal backpack frame, with a scrap of olive green strap still attached. Jake picked it up, glanced at Daniel, and nodded slightly. No doubt remained, this was where Michael had been, but strangely, aside from a few rusted items, the area lacked the usual decay of abandoned campsites. The stone circle was intact, the ash undisturbed, and fresh scratches marked a nearby tree, as if someone had sharpened a knife or carved something in recent years. As Daniel ventured deeper into the southern forest of the valley, he stopped abruptly. On a moss-covered flat rock, someone had carved a strange symbol, an eagle with spread wings. Beneath it a zigzag line like a miniature map. Neither understood its meaning, but Jake recalled hearing about a group of recluses in the late 1970s in eastern Yosemite, calling themselves the Keepers, who used animal symbols to mark their territory. They were rumored to be outlaws, illegally hunting, even intimidating or threatening intruders. Daniel photographed everything and marked the location on his GPS. They spent another half-day searching, but found nothing else. No bones, no camera, no journal. Before leaving Eagle's Hollow, Daniel looked back at the stone circle and backpack frame one last time. He felt certain this wasn't just a campsite, it was like a temporary stop or a place waiting for something. And if Michael had been here, the biggest question was, who or what forced him to leave and never return? The summer of 1995 in Yosemite arrived with rare, searing heat, the kind that cracked the ground and dried up high-altitude streams earlier than usual. It was also the season the national park expanded its ecological surveys into rarely visited areas, including the southern edge of Eagle's Hollow, where Daniel and Jake had ventured 6 years earlier. On July 19th, 2 researchers from the California Parks and Wildlife Service, Elena Marquez and Victor Hall, were tasked with mapping the spread of invasive cedar trees. They weren't focused on missing persons cases, but while navigating a steep rocky slope to mark coordinates, they stumbled upon an unusual sight. Under an overhanging ledge, where light barely reached, was a collapsed tent frame, its canvas faded and torn, tangled with hardened ropes. Nearby, a rusted camp stove lay tilted, its surface still coated with a thin layer of soot, and a dented metal cup sat neatly on a flat rock, as if deliberately placed. Elena and Victor immediately recognized these weren't recent camping traces. Everything was too old. They contacted the rangers, and the message quickly reached the Tuolumne Meadows office. Daniel Whitaker, now a 7-year Yosemite veteran, was the first to arrive. Upon seeing the stove and dusty olive-green fabric scraps mixed in the soil, he knew he was standing in a piece of Michael Foster's story. The area was promptly sealed off, and an investigative and forensic team from Sacramento was dispatched. Excavation proceeded slowly to avoid damaging evidence. They uncovered tattered canvas fragments, matching 1980s backpack material, and a broken 35mm camera lens wedged between 2 rocks, its glass scratched but intact. Beneath a layer of damp soil, a leather-bound notebook emerged, its pages fragile and stuck together from moisture, but the back cover clearly bore the shallowly carved letters, MAF. The notebook was sent to a special preservation lab in Sacramento. It took weeks for experts to separate and dry each page. Most were nature observations, descriptions of the sky's colors, mountain shapes, sketches of birds and animals. But the last 3 entries, dated June 6, 7, and 8, 1981, thickened the air in the investigation room. June 6 went farther than planned. Found a ledge untouched for decades. Strange feeling, like someone's watching. No sound but the wind. June 7th, saw a man this morning. Didn't wave, standing on a high ledge. Not a hiker, no gear. Just standing there. June 8th. Will leave camp at dawn. Last night he came closer. Not a hallucination. He stood by the tree, silent for hours. Packed up, but too dark to leave. Tomorrow, I'll go. There were no entries after that. Those words shifted the entire investigation. For 14 years, the main theory had been an accident or getting lost. But now, the journal revealed the presence of an unknown individual in the canyon at the time of Michael's disappearance. Daniel immediately reviewed missing persons reports from 1980 to 1985 in Yosemite and nearby areas. One name stood out, Elias Monroe, a drifter arrested in 1979 for trespassing on private land near the park's edge. Known to live in deep forests for months, records showed that in the summer of 1981, Monroe was spotted near Illilouette Creek, barefoot, without a tent or backpack. But after 1982, he vanished completely. Was this the man Michael saw, or someone else? A hermit, a fugitive, or worse, a predator in hiding? The question went unanswered, but it put the park on quiet alert. Local media ran sensational stories about the new findings, with haunting headlines. Abandoned camp of tourist missing 14 years found, who was watching him? Old stories resurfaced. A Wawona rancher recalled losing goats in the early 1980s and seeing animal bones arranged in a circle in a canyon. Another retired ranger remembered a hidden shack in the deep forest, containing animal hides, canned goods, and strange rock drawings, but when he returned months later, it had been burned to ash. No lead produced concrete results, but together they painted an unsettling picture. Someone had lived, moved, and watched in Yosemite's forests, and may have encountered Michael Foster that fateful summer. Michael's notebook entries kept Daniel awake for many nights. He kept imagining a silent stranger, standing on a ledge, then approaching the camp at night, and Michael, despite his wilderness experience, feeling uneasy enough to decide to leave at first light. But when morning came, Michael never left. As experts in Sacramento continued examining the notebook's cover and spine, they found a small paper pouch glued inside the cover's lining. Inside were 3 handwritten scraps, clearly torn from another notebook, with shakier, bolder handwriting than the earlier pages. The first read, "If anyone finds this, know I wasn't alone." The second, "He didn't speak, just watched. All night, I heard footsteps around the camp, not a wild animal." The third, briefest of all, "I think he's waiting for me to sleep." This content had never appeared in any prior records, and it nearly dismantled the accident theory. Daniel reported it to his superiors, who only instructed him to investigate quietly to avoid alarming tourists. Unwilling to stop, Daniel met Rebecca Foster in Portland to show her the scraps. She sat silent for a long time, then said, "Michael never imagined things that weren't real. If he wrote this, someone was there, and he knew he was in danger." That conversation strengthened Daniel's resolve. He began reviewing odd incidents in Yosemite from the late 1970s to early 1980s. Short-term disappearances, reports of being watched in the forest, and cases of hikers abandoning trips due to unexplained unease. A 1980 report from a group of student climbers near Merced Lake caught Daniel's attention. They claimed to have seen a long-haired thin man in tattered clothes standing motionless between 2 large trees, watching them, but when one approached, he vanished into the forest in seconds. The description matched Michael's journal: no backpack, no gear, just standing there. Daniel also found a 1982 internal memo where a veteran ranger described finding human footprints deep in the Clark Range during midwinter, when almost no one ventured that far. The tracks led to a narrow crevice with ash and freshly burned animal bones. Combining these scattered clues, Daniel formed a new theory: Michael may have unwittingly entered the territory of a recluse, skilled at moving undetected in the forest. And if true, Michael's chances of leaving Eagles Hollow safely were slim. In late 1995, Daniel sent the notebook, paper scraps, and handwriting analysis to an FBI behavioral psychologist. The response came 2 months later. The writer shows escalating stress but remains coherent, indicating the threat was real, not a hallucination or paranoia. The described behavior of the man aligns with patterns of long-term isolates, potentially with psychological disorders, reacting defensively to strangers. This confirmed Michael's feelings and revealed a chilling reality: Someone may have lived in Yosemite's remote areas for years, entirely beyond park or legal oversight. But what chilled Daniel most was the final line of the third scrap: "I think he's waiting for me to sleep." If true, Michael may have known from the start he wouldn't leave Eagles Hollow. The phrase, "I think he's waiting for me to sleep," haunted Daniel for weeks after the FBI report. He couldn't stop thinking that Michael might have left more clues, something showing the face or form of the man. This drove Daniel to recheck the evidence inventory. At the bottom of the list, he found an overlooked entry: Nikon 35mm camera body, severely damaged, lens broken, film inside waterlogged. Found at Eagles Hollow in 1995, it had never been processed due to its condition. Daniel immediately requested the film be sent to a specialized photo restoration lab in San Francisco, known for recovering flood-damaged film from 1982. It took nearly 3 weeks for technicians to separate the stuck film and treat it chemically to salvage any frames. Only 3 partial images survived, each haunting in its own way. The first was a typical scene. Shot at sunset, dark pine branches cutting across an orange-gold sky with a distant ridge. The angle and lighting were quintessentially Michael's, clean and serene. Nothing unusual, but Daniel noted it might be the last photo Michael took while feeling safe. The second image stopped him cold. It was a timed self-portrait. Michael stood before a large boulder, holding the camera's remote trigger. He wasn't smiling, his eyes fixed on the lens, his face tense. But what gave Daniel chills was the background. Between 2 dark trees on the right, a faint figure of a tall, thin man with disheveled hair. No backpack, one shoulder leaning against a tree, his face slightly turned as if trying to hide. When zoomed in, technicians noted his eyes reflected a small glint, showing he was looking directly at the camera. The third image was nearly all dark, possibly shot accidentally at night. But in the bottom left corner, a blurred hand reached forward. It wasn't clear if it was Michael's or someone else's, but experts said the hand size and angle suggested it belonged to someone approaching the camera. When the 3 photos were printed, Daniel laid them out alongside the final journal entries. The 2 sets of clues seemed to align perfectly. Michael saw someone who didn't leave, came closer, and waited for an opportunity. Daniel showed the photos to Rebecca. She stared at the second one for a long time, then whispered, "That's why he didn't come back." The media, catching wind of the film, erupted with stories. Headlines like "Shadow Behind Missing Tourist" and "Stranger Encounter in Yosemite, Camera Evidence" filled local papers. But despite the frenzy, the man's identity remained a void. No records, no living witnesses, no arrests. For Daniel, the film not only confirmed another person's presence at Eagles Hollow when Michael vanished, but showed Michael sensed the danger and tried to document it, perhaps hoping someone would find it. And now, 14 years late, Daniel was the one Michael had entrusted with that truth. The photos from the film created an unseen pressure that drove Daniel to dig deeper. He knew that if the man was truly living hidden in Yosemite, he must have left traces beyond Eagles Hollow. The question was, where to look? In early 1996, while reviewing old reports, an unexpected lead emerged. A property manager in El Portal, Howard Briggs, called the ranger station. He said, while clearing an old cabin for sale, owned by a reclusive man named Harold Kane, who died in 1995, he found a sealed metal box hidden in the attic. Inside were odd items: a hunting knife, hand-drawn Yosemite maps with cryptic symbols, and a leather-bound notebook with sporadic entries from 1979 to 1984. Howard had heard about Michael's film on the radio, and flipping through the notebook, noticed entries that might be related. Daniel immediately drove to El Portal. Kane's notebook was written in small, hurried script, mixing weather notes, hunting locations, and paranoid remarks about strangers crossing his land. An entry dated June 6, 81 read, "Saw a man on the north slope, not local. Had a camera. Don't like this. Don't trust, he's just a tourist." Another, dated September 6, 81, stated, "Still haven't seen him. Maybe he found the old spot. Can't let anyone get close." No mention of Michael by name, but the timing and description matched his journal chillingly. Daniel asked Howard about Kane. He described Kane as a loner who despised outsiders, often chasing hunters and hikers off his land with a gun. Locals rumored he had secret hideouts in the forest for storing gear or wintering. With permission from Kane's heir, Daniel and 2 volunteers, with a tracking dog, searched Kane's property, which bordered Yosemite's southern wilderness. After nearly a day of scouring, they found a narrow canyon leading to an unmapped valley. There, hidden under a rusted metal sheet propped against a cliff, was a cache: old canned meat, a portable stove frame, and a tin containing a small silver compass. Daniel recognized it instantly. It was the compass Michael always wore around his neck, a gift from his late father. Rebecca later confirmed this without doubt. Forensic technicians tested DNA from the compass hinge and found a partial match with Michael's toothbrush sample. This proved Michael had been there, a location over 5 miles from Eagles Hollow, entirely outside the 1981 search area. But the biggest question remained: how did the compass end up with Kane? And if he was involved, where was Michael taken after leaving Eagles Hollow? The notebook and compass opened a new dark corridor in the maze of the disappearance, but Daniel knew he was one step closer to the truth, and to the shadow of the recluse who'd haunted Yosemite for nearly 2 decades. Finding the silver compass not only confirmed Michael had left Eagles Hollow, but suggested that Harold Kane, or someone who lived with or after him, had brought Michael to another location. Daniel decided to thoroughly search Kane's former land bordering Yosemite, focusing on spots where a recluse might hide gear or bury evidence. He recalled an elderly El Portal man, once a distant neighbor of Kane, saying Kane was obsessed with keeping safe things no one should see, and once drunk, drew a broken pine and a split boulder on a napkin. In late October 1996, Daniel, with 2 seasoned rangers, Tom Garrity and Lucas Reed, armed with a metal detector and small shovels, ventured into the southern part of the land. After nearly 2 days navigating granite-strewn slopes, they found a boulder nearly 3 meters tall, split vertically. Beside it was a pine broken in half, its base still rooted, but its trunk fallen down the slope years ago. Between the boulder's halves was a hollow filled with deliberately stacked stones. Removing the layers, they uncovered an old metal ammo can, rusted but sealed. It took nearly 10 minutes to pry open, revealing time-ravaged items: a singed notebook, barely legible, a few .22 bullets, and crucially, a fairly clear Polaroid photo. Daniel's heart raced upon seeing it. Michael Foster, standing upright, hands hidden behind him, face exhausted, eyes vacant as if focused on something off-frame. The background was an unfamiliar forest, unlike Eagles Hollow or any place Daniel knew. When analyzed, technicians found a chilling detail: zooming in on the shadow around Michael's wrists, revealed a thin, bright line, like a rope or makeshift cuffs. Even more, faint drag marks on the ground before his feet suggested he'd been pulled or forced to stand in place. The photo erased any final doubt that Michael's disappearance was an accident. Someone had restrained him, and the photo was taken from less than 3 meters away by someone skilled with a camera. Daniel stood silent for a long time, holding the photo. He understood this was the most direct evidence yet that the 1981 disappearance was an abduction, and likely a murder. But it also opened a new mystery: who took the photo, and why keep it for over a decade, buried with other items? Did Kane do it, or did someone else continue hiding it after his death? These questions hung like thick fog over Yosemite, and Daniel knew he was venturing deeper into the territory of the man who waited for Michael to sleep on his final night. The Polaroid of Michael with bound hands silently confirmed what Daniel had long suspected: he'd faced someone who knew Yosemite better than anyone. But to find him, Daniel had to face a cold reality. The park and surrounding lands were so vast that someone wanting to hide could vanish for decades, undetected. In spring 1997, Daniel began unofficial collaboration with FBI agent Teresa Lane, who'd investigated murders in the rugged Appalachians, terrain as treacherous as Yosemite. Teresa studied the file, examined the Polaroid, and remarked, "The photographer stood very close, and he wanted this photo to exist." This wasn't impulsive. He knew how to store, to hide, and he believed he'd never be found. They focused on scattered reports of cabin break-ins, distant campfire smoke, or shouts warning hikers to turn back from deep forests with no visible speaker. Over the summer, Daniel and Teresa scoured lesser-used trails, noting water sources, ledges with trail views, and canyons wide enough for temporary shelters. In an area bordering southern Eagles Hollow, they found signs of recent cooking: fresh ash, unburned wood, and a bean can with a 1994 expiration date. This meant someone had lived or visited the area within the past few years. But what unnerved Daniel most was how the firewood was stacked neatly, squarely, a sign of someone who'd been there long and was adept at long-term survival. A week later, a Wawona horse wrangler reported hearing someone yell, "Stay off the trail," while guiding tourists through the forest. The group turned back but saw no one, only hearing wind through the pines. Such stories, though leaving no physical evidence, recurred over years, suggesting a chilling truth: someone was still watching Yosemite from within, revealing their presence only when they chose. Teresa said bluntly, "He belongs to this land in a way we never will. That's why he's still out of reach." For Daniel, this meant one thing: to find answers about Michael's death, he had to go deeper into the territory of the one who knew the paths, even if it meant facing the same darkness Michael encountered in the summer of 1981. Daniel knew that to break the circle of silence around Michael's disappearance, he needed something clear enough to force both investigators and the public to face the truth. In September 1997, an unexpected opportunity arose. A group of licensed hunters in a privately owned area southwest of Yosemite, once Kane's land, now sold to a hunting lease company, dug up a steel drum sealed with industrial tape while building a temporary blind. Inside was an old tarp wrapped around items, a worn hiking boot with a cracked sole, 3 unprocessed film rolls, and a metal canister etched with MAF. Sent to Quantico's lab, technicians tried to salvage the heavily molded film. Most was ruined, but 2 images faintly emerged. The first was a close-up of a handwritten journal page, not matching any of Michael's found notebooks. The shaky, slanted text read, "If anyone finds this, I tried to leave. I made it to the hollow, but he was faster. I don't know how long I've been here. Every night I hear noises. Sometimes I think I'm already gone." The second, fainter image showed a flickering fire and a thin figure sitting beside it, head bowed, face turned away. The distance was too great to identify, but it clearly wasn't Michael. For Daniel, the journal photo was the final blow to the accident theory some still clung to. It was Michael's direct confirmation of being held and pursued. With the Polaroid and note scraps, the story now formed an undeniable line. Michael encountered someone in Eagles Hollow, was followed, abducted, moved across locations, and vanished. On January 12, 2000, Michael Foster's case was officially reclassified as homicide perpetrator unknown. A memorial was held in Boulder, where Rebecca read her brother's journal entries aloud, her voice breaking at, "I think he's waiting for me to sleep." No charges were filed. Harold Kane was dead, and if he had an accomplice, they remained out there, hidden among the rocky slopes and pine forests, where only those truly of the land could find their way. After the ceremony, Daniel stood with Rebecca before a Yosemite map, eyes fixed on a red pin marking Eagles Hollow. He knew answers might never surface, but at least Michael had left the world a final word, not spoken, but in trembling handwriting amid the darkness, the script of a man who knew he was hunted and still tried to leave a marker for those seeking the truth. Michael Foster's story is not just a mysterious 1981 disappearance in Yosemite, but a stark reminder of the importance of preparation, vigilance, and community support when facing the wilderness. Michael was an experienced hiker, equipped with a map, water, food, photography gear, and meticulous journal entries. Yet he found himself in danger when encountering a mysterious man in Eagles Hollow, whose identity was never confirmed. His final journal lines, "I think he's waiting for me to sleep," and the film found after 14 years show Michael recognized the threat. But Yosemite's rugged terrain and vast expanse swallowed all traces. In today's American society, where people seek nature for tranquility or challenge, this story reminds us that safety can never be taken lightly. Sharing itineraries with others, carrying satellite communication devices, and having escape plans are critical, even for seasoned adventurers. Moreover, Daniel and Rebecca's persistence, reviewing old files, chasing every lead, recovering the compass and film, offers a lesson in the power of community and determination. In a world where disappearances can quickly fade from memory, keeping a story alive is the only way to eventually uncover the truth. Yosemite, or any American wilderness, is beautiful but harbors dangers. And the most terrifying isn't nature, but the people hiding within it. If you want to explore more unsolved mysteries like Michael Foster's disappearance in Yosemite, hit the subscribe button to stay updated on every story. Thank you for following, and see you in the next video with more gripping, haunting journeys to uncover the truth.